Hello, my name is Ethan Smiley, and for my anthropology final project for this semester, I decided to take a look at the pandemic's effect on the social and educational development of children, adolescents, and young adults here in West Lafayette, Indiana. I did this by interviewing several student teachers and several students here at Purdue who are looking to become education majors either at the high school level or the elementary level. And I just wanted to get to know how the pandemic has affected student learning and their social development and what changes teachers had to make during the pandemic in order to make sure the children get the education that they should properly receive. So, as for an introduction, due to the lockdown procedures from the COVID-19 pandemic, education for students has looked quite different in this past year. Many institutions, such as Purdue and high schools and elementary schools, have had to switch to virtual learning, which is learning through your computer and through Zoom, like we all know and grown to love now. And like some of the virtual learning that occurred last year when the pandemic hit is still continuing to this year as schools are transitioning to more in-person activities. Um, no student has really like been safe from it, from the kindergarten level to the college level. Students and educators and professors have had to adapt to this very unique challenge and very unique set of circumstances. This project is very important because these students are the next generation and the next set of people who are going to tackle future problems such as feeding the growing population. And so they need to be adequately prepared for these skills. And the first step in order to be adequately prepared is to be able to have the right education and to be able to have the right social skills to interact with their peers to solve these problems. The pandemic wasn't just a local United States or Indiana problem either; it was a global problem, and we weren't the only country that had to make changes to our education system in order to make sure that our future generations were adequately prepared for the new world and virtual learning. The first student that I interviewed that is a aspiring teacher and goes to here at Purdue is Tom Panola. He is a secondary English education major. And from when I was talking to Tom, the main thing he seemed to take away from the pandemic was that it really opened his eyes to what it's going to be like as a teacher in this new virtual learning world. He said by taking classes online, he experienced the difficulty of trying to learn outside the lecture hall or the classroom and not getting that one-on-one time with their professors or teachers. And then also, he said the biggest thing he learned from a teacher's point of view is being understanding of each student's circumstance. Like, you don't know what their home life's like, you don't know what they're going through in terms of family and friends, and if something bad has happened. And then he said also that if anything, the pandemic has increased his opportunities for learning through technology. It has increased his learning experience and the skills that he will take to his future classroom and implement in his lesson plans and what have you. The second student that I interviewed was Lauren Decamp, who is a secondary math education major here at Purdue. And she's in her senior year, which means she's doing student teaching. And she did her student teaching at a local high school, William Henry Harrison High School. And she said that she had that in-class experience. So she said that students wearing a mask during all the times of the day was kind of a distraction for them. And, some don't want to be compliant with the mask behavior and some wear it improperly, and that bothers other students, which really distracts from the learning environment and making sure everybody stays on task and doing and what they're supposed to, and making sure getting those students learning the skills that they need. And then also she said learning self-discipline as a student was a big thing in terms of having virtual learning this year and this past year because of the pandemic. Like if they uh, if they wanted to stay on track and continue to have success in school and be successful when they do return to online classes, I mean in-person classes, then it was crucial that they stayed focused and had a little bit of self-discipline at home in order to be better when they came back. The third student I interviewed here at Purdue was Shelby Bullock. She's a sophomore studying elementary education. So she's a little different than Tom and Lauren in that she works with younger students. And she said that the one of the things she noticed was like there's less student interaction in the front of the classroom with the room or peers because of the pandemic. This meant less group work. Students couldn't come up and show their work on the board, and it really changed how classroom participation worked. And it resulted in less student engagement. As you know, student engagement and making sure that kids are focused and dialed in on what they're doing as a class is important to elementary education. And, seeing one of your peers do it is, kind of like popcorn reading or doing a math problem on the board or answering questions as a class is important to elementary education. And with the pandemic, it's really just kind of, changed the way participation is rewarded in the elementary classroom. And this has been a real big difficult for her. And then last but not least, the last person I interviewed was my brother, Evan Smiley. Evan works as a teacher's aide at Carmel High School. He said the biggest thing he noticed while being a teacher's aide is that, the classrooms now are having to follow social distance guidelines. And I'm sure you've all noticed the socially distanced guidelines here at Purdue with, the arrows of where you can walk and standing 6 feet apart and having spaced out desks and the weird plastic things in the front of classrooms. Evan also said that in high school that they would have to arrange the desk in the classroom so that if a student tested positive, then the least amount of students would be have to be quarantined and switch to all virtual learning. The engagement in terms of virtual learning isn't as good as is in person, so it's really important to try to keep as many students in person as possible. And this was just one of the many challenges they had to deal with. In conclusion, neither students or teachers were prepared to handle the changes brought about by the pandemic. Each student situation must be handled differently and is handled differently. It's all dependent on if their family member maybe had the virus or even if they had the virus and had to be isolated for 10 days, which could be a really traumatic or really just hard experience at any age, teen, adolescent, child, college student, young adult, it doesn't matter. It's a very hard time. And then also, it also kind of depends on how well equipped the parents are to take care of their children during the pandemic. Are mom and dad at home from work, or do they have to still go out and work, or are they unemployed and struggling to make ends meet? This is a good thing to keep in mind and could cause a lot of stress on the student, causing them not to perform as well in school. And then also, we got to keep in mind that transitioning back to modified in-person classes has had some challenges as well. Students may not be showing up as much out of fear of the virus and not wanting to get exposed to it, or might not be as engaging as much because they're stressed about certain situations or different aspects of COVID-19 or different things that they might be on their mind. In terms of implications, the pandemic may have had some negative effects on education, but we can also look at some positives too. Advances in technology have allowed education to resume during these difficult times, which wouldn't be a thing in the past. For example, we were able to do lectures on Zoom, Google Classroom, Canvas, and etc. It's potentially shaped how education will proceed in the future. More virtual learning and at-home learning, more technology in the classroom to engage the students. And then also students are forced to take more initiative on their own for their education, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It taught that education was important and it should be valued, and I think this did a very good job of teaching students that. And then also, no education system is perfect. The it's good to always be modifying education systems in order to make them better and more adapt for the student and their environment. As we learn more about students and as students change over the years, it's important to modify the education system. So lastly, I'd like to thank Tom, Shelby, Lauren, and Evan for allowing me to use their testimonies and photos in my presentation. Without them, this presentation wouldn't be possible because they made a bulk of the data. So thank you guys, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.